Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nichols, welcome back. As we discussed the last time you appeared before this committee, I am deeply concerned about the Biden administration's decision in November to dismantle terrorism sanctions against the FARC and against FARC members. The FARC is an organization of Marxist-Leninist narco-terrorists. For decades, they have killed and kidnapped and extorted Colombians. They have murdered and seized American citizens. They continue to pose an acute threat to Colombian security and to American interests across the region. The last time we spoke, the decision to dismantle terrorism sanctions had just been announced. Since then, presumably, you've had some time to evaluate the effects. I want to ask you some questions about that. One of the reasons publicly cited for the removal of the FTO listing was to provide certain types of U.S. assistance to FARC for reintegration into Colombian society. I believe that justification is deeply flawed, but it was at least a reason that the administration cited for dismantling the sanctions. So, have you distributed any such aid? And if so, what checks were in place to ensure funding was not used for terrorism?
Thank you, Senator. It's a pleasure to see you again. The decision to designate the FARC-EP and the Segunda Marquetalia as the current groups engaged in terror activity in Colombia was one fully concordant with the process of implementing the peace accords. We have continued our efforts to provide broad assistance to rural areas in Colombia.
Mr. Nichols, if I could ask you to answer the specific question I asked, which is, have you distributed any such aid to the FARC or members of the FARC?
I would have to defer to my colleague from USAID on the specifics of their program.
We do not work or support terrorists. We do not give any funds. They are not eligible to receive. Okay, to receive funds from USAID, and we actually have.
So your testimony is that the Biden administration has not given any funds to FARC or members of the FARC.
Right, they have not.
Good.
Only to FARC deserters and people who have laid down their arms.
So alongside removing terrorism sanctions on FARC, you also removed terrorist sanctions on individual FARC members. The press release that the Biden administration published listed literally hundreds of entities. A few weeks later, on December 11th, Colombia's Special Jurisdiction for Peace, an independent entity tasked with implementing the peace accords, issued summons for 47 FARC members because they had been involved in the forced recruitment of children for the conflict and for child trafficking. 5 of these individuals had been sanctioned by the United States for their roles until you removed them a few weeks earlier. Did the State Department consult with the Colombians about these individuals before lifting sanctions, and did you reimpose sanctions after the announcement of their involvement with child trafficking?
So the process of delisting the FARC and listing FARC-EP and Segunda Marquetalia was done in consultation with the government of Colombia. The FARC, as the organization that signed the 2016 peace agreement, is not listed as a terror organization in Colombia. U.S. immigration law prevents the entry of any of the members of the FARC who took up arms.
So was the Biden State Department aware of the work and impending decision of Colombia's Special Jurisdiction for Peace at the time you lifted the sanctions on these individuals?
They don't consult their decisions with the United States government before.
So you were not aware of it?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, I want to shift in my remaining time to Mexico. Mr. Nichols, as you know and we've discussed, I'm deeply concerned about deepening civil unrest in Mexico and the breakdown there of civil society. The breakdown of the rule of law across our southern border poses acute national security challenges and dangers to the United States on issues ranging from counter-narcotics to illegal immigration. The current climate faced by politicians and journalists in Mexico is the deadliest ever. In 2020, more journalists were killed in Mexico than in any other country in the world. It alone accounted for almost a third of the journalists killed. Since the start of the electoral process in September 2020, over 80 politicians were assassinated by criminal organizations, and more than 60 candidates suspended their campaigns under duress. President Lopez Obrador seems intent on making all of these trends worse. On Friday, he used his morning press conference to intimidate one of Mexico's highest-profile journalists, Carlos Loret de Mola. He waved around private financial information and asked authorities to investigate it. He seems to be indulging in abusing power, no matter the effect on Mexico or the U.S.-Mexico relations. What steps is the Biden administration taking to convey to the Mexican government that their behavior is undermining the rule of law and that that is in turn endangering American security and the U.S.-Mexico relationship?
We have a deep and comprehensive relationship with Mexico on security issues. My colleague from INL and I were in Mexico last year to discuss these issues, and our embassy continues to be engaged on the full range of security questions.
What have you expressed about the murder of journalists, politicians, and the intimidation of journalists?
We have said that we believe that the murder of journalists and the murder of civil society members is a tremendous problem and a stain for all of us. We need to take actions to protect those important members of Mexican society. It is crucial for us to redouble our efforts to protect politicians, journalists, civil society members. It's vital, and we talk about that with our Mexican colleagues all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Haggard.